to drive or not? That brings up a lot. Hi, I'm Lynn Davison, your adulting coach. And this struggle was posted at one of the Facebook pages supporting moms of autistic teens, young adults, and adults. And I think it's a really good question because sometimes we don't consider whether or not we have to do something fully. And I'd like to explain what I mean by that. But first, let's keep in mind, let's remind ourselves always that our goal is to encourage our autistic young adults to practice the set of mental tools that help them manage their thoughts, their emotions, and their actions so that they achieve goals set by them for them. This is how they self-advocate to name and claim a life they love. It's really smart to encourage all of that executive functioning in our autistic young adults in a systematic way, just as if we were their coach, helping them improve their game. And like any good coach, we are there to encourage them, to warn them of mistakes and potential triggers that might get them off track, and to be consulted by them. Those are our 3 rules, and they ironically are the same 3 roles that Her Majesty, the Queen of England, performs. That's where this idea came from. And it's Richard. I originally heard it in Richard and Linda Eyres' valuesparenting.org, and they found it at Walter Bagehot's The British Constitution. So sometimes I need to remind myself to put my crown on my head. And I think it's a great it's a great image to help me remember the role that I want to perform in my parenting. That's because a coach trains someone intensively, and that's my intention, is to make sure that I do everything that I can before I meet my maker to ensure that my autistic young adults have the tools and the strategies and the practice to become the self-reliant adult that I know they can become. And I look at it always from an IMAP perspective. This is my 4-part roadmap. We focus on my identity first, like who are we at our best to find peace and making progress in pieces, because it's going to be incremental. And that is what guides us too when we're triggered, is where are we at our core? Who do we want to show up as when we are at our best? And then I look at the mindset. Okay, what are the thoughts that are behind the emotions that it creates whenever I think about my young adult driving? And there's a lot of them. When you consider, the risks associated with driving and the skills that are necessary, and we look at our young adults and realize that they're just not there yet if they haven't yet learned how to drive. Okay, so then now what do? We need to take the actions, so that we need to decide what they are, so that we either take a step toward, we do take a step toward making this decision. And then let's look at the people we could recruit to help us achieve this goal. And my favorite recruit in this adventure was Don from Drive On here in Rochester, New York. And if I could clone him and send him to each one of you who are interested in having your young adult drive, I would, because he made it possible for our family. And I'm so grateful to him for that. So let's consider what is going on in both of us when we consider this question. And we always are noticing what our brain offers us that's consistent with the motivational triad, because that's how our brains are wired. Our midbrain in particular is motivated to seek pleasure and to avoid pain and to conserve energy. And it wants us to stay where we are. It wants us to keep practicing what we've always practiced, keep thinking what we've always thought, because that conserves energy. And that seems like a good idea, except it was a great idea in, the caveman days when we had to spend 99% of our time surviving. That made sense to keep looking at these three things so that we would survive, to propagate. And we did. And today, that motivation triad, if we just follow those default thoughts that our brain offers us all the time, we're going to stay stuck, because we're going to stay where we've always been, doing what we've always done. Today, we have to, instead of seeking pleasure through instant gratification, we need to do it through delayed gratification. And we need to embrace pain, the progress pain that it takes to get where we want to go next. Like whenever I work out again after, the aches that I feel in my muscles, that's telling me that I'm making progress, strengthening my body. And of course, conserving energy. We need to expend energy, a lot of energy, experimenting on all the different options that there are, and ways for us to take action to create what we love. So with that in mind, we have to remember that we either drive our thoughts or our thoughts drive us. So let's start there. First, we know what our identity is as a mom and as a young adult. We want to have that crown on our head and encourage adulting actions, and encourage that self-advocacy in our young adults. So the first step then is to figure out, oh, what are the thoughts that are going on in my head? That's a thought download. We just externalize our thinking by recording it somehow, somewhere. Open up your notes app on your phone, create a Google Doc on your Google Drive, record your thoughts using otter.ai. You get 600 free minutes each month. That ought to be enough, so that any way that we can take our thoughts out of our heads and record them is what we want to do, to look at them, because we can't look at them when they're just that ticker tape playing on in our head, that spin cycle of thoughts where we can't tell one from the other. We need to get them out, recorded, so that we can look at what they are creating in our lives. And the way we do that, and I love this process because it says, okay, yeah, positive thinking, and yeah, the law of attraction, and yeah, we become what we think about, but how? This is the how. We use the steer map to slow things down, especially for those of us who need a longer processing time and a slower processing speed. We slow things down and we look at, okay, what's the situation? The situation is the decision to drive or not. What are our thoughts? And you have one steer map per thought. And I have always found it so helpful to lay them out in a sheet. Just put, just that row is just one thought after the other. And then once I look at those thoughts that I've downloaded in the step before, then I figure out what are the emotions that each one of those thoughts create. Because the situation's the same. It's my thinking that changes. What are the emotions that those thoughts inspire? And some people will argue whether or not it's the thoughts first or the emotions. It's the chicken or the egg discussion, right? In my opinion. But what's important is getting it down, recording it somewhere. Then we look at those actions and how they flavor our results. If we go at the driving process fearfully, we're gonna take different actions and produce different results than if we approach the driving decision with confidence. That's going to flavor our actions in a different way and produce different results. You see why that's so important, to slow things down and look at what the thoughts are that our minds are creating. The situation is always outside of our control, but our thoughts, our emotions, and our action, our TEA, are ours. And we can decide in advance intentionally what those are going to be that produce the results we have in our lives. Golden process. Then, of course, once we're centered on what is the thought that we believe is going to produce the result that we want, because they always tie back to each other, that's the one we choose to practice, or the set of thoughts that we choose to practice. That's when we say to ourselves, I know we can figure this out, or I'm afraid, and that's okay, or she's really resistant to this idea of driving, and that's okay. Maybe for her, it would be better to use mass transit and that then drive, and that's okay. Maybe because we live in a place that doesn't offer easily accessed mass transit, maybe this is something we have to figure out. All those thoughts are going to drive different emotions and actions and results. And we have to pick the one that's going to work best for us and then practice that and help our autistic young adults as their coach to figure this out as well. Now, obviously, this can take some time, and that's fine, because when we take the time to do this in a way that the thought is really true to us, it's not something that we've just decided to, look through the world in rose-colored glasses. No, it's really something that's true to us. If we help them figure out the thought that's true to them, that's going to stick. Not our thoughts. We know better than that. When we suggest, advise, and criticize, it's like Teflon. It falls right off of their brain. But when they figure out what thoughts are true to them and how they want to show up and what actions they want to take, that's when it really sticks and we make progress. So then we step into the collaborative, proactive solutions process that Dr. Ross Green illustrates beautifully for free at his livesinthebalance.org website. That's where we look just at the facts. Remember, that's the part that we cannot control. That's what's outside of our control, are just the facts. Then we look at their steer map, what's going on with them, and we listen and reflect and listen and reflect and listen and reflect until it's enough, until they feel heard, until they feel seen and safe and soothed, that we know what's going on for them so they can feel secure in going into this problem solving process with us. We've made it predictable for them that they can share what's going on, and they know that even if they say something that ticks us off or triggers us or whatever, we'll come back to center ourselves and we'll continue to work on the process together. When we do this over and over and over and over again with our autistic young adults, then they know they can consult with us to find a solution that works for them. How important is that? I mean, we have a lot more miles on our tires than they do. And it would be in their best interest to ask us what we think. And we need to understand that they might not always agree with what we say and will resist, especially in the beginning, many of the options that we offer them. But that's okay. We can move on from there. We at least have heard each other. We have a clear, open channel, and that helps us connect over and over again. And that's really what we want to do, because we do love our autistic young adults down to their toes. And we are part of the part of that group that's going to close the gap between those who high school graduates who's autistic, who say they're going to live independently. 80% of them, 80% of the 50,000 that graduate every year say they're going to live independently. And the 25% of autistic 30-year-olds who do so today. We're going to close that gap. We're going to be the people the families that do that. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to do everything themselves. We can garner the kinds of resources that they need. We can gather up the people that are going to give them the right support at the right time to help them make it on their own. This is possible. I know it is. And we'll do better when we do it together. So the next step is, of course, we share our dear map. We make sure that it's short and clear, because we know that the attention span on what we're thinking is can be limited. And we also want to just know exactly where we are on that. So we've done our work ahead of time on our steer map. And then we agree to experiment. We use the scientific method, something we were all taught in school, where we gather up our data, come up with a hypothesis, do the experiment, and learn what happened. And when we do that scientific process, again, we're taking it and we're recording it outside and looking at it and saying, how can we solve this problem together? How can we make progress in this area of to create the life that you love? I know we can do this together, so let's do it. Let's figure this out through an experiment. And we're not always going to get it right. We're going to have a lot of mistakes that we can learn from and move on to the next experiment, just as Thomas Edison did thousands of times before he created the light bulb. And so many other people who have made our lives better by being willing to experiment and learn from the mistakes. I mean, just think of the number of mistakes there were in Gone with the Wind, that movie. I'm sure it's such a classic, and it's, that every time they set up the camera to shoot the shot, it wasn't right the first time. They had to keep at it until they got the perfect shot that was then perfectly edited into this beautiful story that has lived long past many of the members of the cast and the production staff. So that's what I kind of think of as, if I were to look at my life as a movie, I'm going to have a lot of mistakes. But as long as I'm willing to help myself and my autistic young adults learn from those mistakes, I know we can make progress together. So this is, the conclusion is basically, to drive or not to drive is up to you and your autistic young adult. And in fact, the mom who inspired this post at Facebook said they chose not to have her drive. Interesting. That option is available. Hadn't thought about that myself, because I live in an area where mass transit just isn't an option for our kids to get where they need to go to work. And I didn't want to have to drive them every single day for the rest of their lives. But in their case, it's probably going to work. They found the solution, at least for now, that works best for them. So please join us there, or come visit me at my website /blog for a transcript and the resources that I mentioned in this video. Bye for now.